every story has a beginning. My story begins in the mid-1970s when I was born. So I grew up in the 80s. Mid-80s I was a teenager. And that's when HIV really kind of came about, and when it became popular as such. The government did this wonderful advertising campaign that educated everyone that HIV was this deadly risk, and they had this advert, and I'll never forget it. It was a tombstone with AIDS written down it, and the tombstone fell over, and it was, you weren't to die of ignorance, because AIDS would kill you. And that was my entire education on HIV. And I lived my life in wonderful, blissful ignorance, because it didn't affect me. I didn't need to look at it. Fast forward to the mid-2000s. I had a very successful building company, married to a nice woman, had a child. Then 2009, there was a recession, much like what we've just been through, but just no general reason for it. And I lost the business. When the business went, the wife kind of went with the money. So I found myself divorced with no business. And I went a bit wild, as you do, newly single, number of one-night stands, enjoying life. Then I met another young lady, and we started to get a bit more serious. So I decided to go for an STI check, because I'd been out having fun. Do the sensible thing for once in my life. And you go in and they ask you all these questions, and you know, do you want this test? Do you want that test? What have you been exposed to? And I went, just do an MOT. Do the lot. Let's just rule everything out completely. So they did the MOT, and I thought nothing of it, because they just said, if nothing comes back, we won't even ring you. About 3 days later, it was a Thursday, I get a phone call from the clinic about 12 o'clock. Any chance you can nip in? We need to have a quick word. Nothing serious, just a quick word with you. Alright, well, I'm at work, so I made the appointment for last thing that day. I goes in and registers at reception. They said, take a seat. Sits down thinking, I must have chlamydia or something like that, you know, nothing interesting. Couple of pills, I'll be fine. Consultant calls me through, she sits me down, she closes the door, and as she's walking from the door to a seat, she went, there's no easy way to say this, you're HIV positive. Well, that hit me like a ton of bricks. It took me back to that HIV advert, that I've got AIDS, I'm going to die. Now she might have said a few more bits, she must have done, because I was in there about 25 minutes. But from there, I then had to go home and tell my then partner that I had HIV and that I was possibly going to die. And as I told her, I saw in her eyes the same fears that I had. And she was, I'll stay with you, I'll support you, you know, I'll always be there for you. That lasted about 4 weeks, and she went out, she took her son to nursery and never came back. And I got a phone call off her mum, get out the house, we don't want to see you. So I then found myself homeless, jobless, totally crashed. And that's where the mental health crisis teams came in. They put me in a crisis house. They put me on suicide watch. I was in a real mess. And after a week or so, they thought that I wasn't going to kill myself quite yet. And they said, you need to leave. Is there any way you can go? Well, I don't know. My head wasn't working at all. So I went, well, I could maybe ring my dad. So I rang my dad and said, Dad, I'm in the stuck. I need somewhere. And he said, well, you know where your bed is. You've got a front door key. Of course you can come home. The crisis team put the fuel in my car, and I drove back to my dad's. And my dad babysat me for quite a long time, but with a lot of support from the local HIV charities, mental health teams, a lot of support off my family. I slowly got stronger, accepted the HIV, accepted living with HIV, educated myself that I wasn't going to die, that I could have this life, that I could kind of continue living. But I also came to the realisation that I was going to be on my own. Who else was going to want to take on this HIV, my health issues? Nobody else is going to want to take that on. So I accepted it. It was just, this is going to be me. Quite happy, I've got a daughter. I ended up getting full custody of my daughter through the courts. And I was fine. Then, fast forward a little bit longer, and through the wonders of Facebook, I bumped into or got connected with a girl that I'd gone out with in my teens, my first real serious girlfriend. And we got talking, and we got on really well, and decided that we were going to have this date to see how things went. And my anxiety and fears came back. I've got HIV. What am I going to do? She's not going to want to take on this HIV again. And I decided in my own head that I had to tell her before the date. Not after it, before it, so that if she wanted to run away, she could do. So through messaging, I messaged her and said, I don't know how to say this, but I'm HIV positive. I'm undetectable, so I'm safe and I'm on treatment, but just so that you know. And the response I got was, and your issue is? Why is that a problem? She knew that you could be on treatment and you wouldn't harm anyone. She knew that it wasn't a death sentence. She knew that you could have a full life. And it was so refreshing to meet somebody that understood like that. Fast forward to the present day, we've now been married for 2 years. We have 3 kids between us, and we enjoy life to the full. and make the best of what we've got.